And funding is always meant debt and equity. It's never just meant equity, which again people have lost sight of over the last few years. Media has, glorified equity fundraising, VC, even becoming an angel investor. Not a great idea for everyone, by the way. I've learned the hard way.
How much money have you lost?
Enough. Not in GetVantage. So GetVantage is going to be my big ticket out of here.
Karun, if you could share a little bit about your journey and from the start of your career to basically getting to GetVantage and how you joined the team, basically. I mean, what was the reason for getting associated?
Sure. So I actually have a really interesting, or at least what I think is interesting background and relationship with GetVantage. A couple of my co-founders, so one of my co-founders who most of you all may have sort of seen and heard, Bhavik Vasa, he and I are very old friends. We've known each other, I think, for about 25 years. And the idea for GetVantage is actually something we had first discussed in 2015. I was at Uber at the time. I was one of the early employees for Uber in Asia, actually. He was working as chief growth officer and sort of the founding team at a company called iterated before this. And we were both busy in our lives, and we were like, we'll revisit this idea when we have a bit more time. And so in 2018, he exited iterated. He was having his daughter, and he took a year off sabbatical. And I encouraged him to get back into it and revisit this idea in 2019, because you couldn't sit on the sidelines too long. Otherwise, you kind of lose touch of the network and all the equity that you've built in the sector. So in 2019, we started building the business plan really for GetVantage, thinking about the name, the brand, what do we want to really, what do we want GetVantage to help people do in India, and what kind of role do we want to play in the ecosystem. So that was really the genesis of GetVantage. So I started out as, well, he actually wanted me to come back to India and be a formal co-founder, but I delayed a little bit, and then COVID hit, so I was stuck in Singapore for 2 years, so I don't call myself a co-founder at all. But being an early investor, was an first investor in the company, and the idea was, and a very strategic advisor, obviously, but the idea was always to come back and build it together. And so I decided to move back to India about 4 months ago, and I've been here since.
Pretty recent, I guess.
Very recent. After a long stint in Singapore as well. So I've been in Singapore for the last 13 years, but now here and...
Awesome. So I think that's rare in general for people to come back to India, but I think that's a trend that we are seeing on the rise in general. But Karun, so I think this story is something which is relatable to everyone. Everyone has friends that they discuss startup ideas with, but you have actually gone ahead and done that, right? But okay, for those who don't know about GetVantage, can you give us a overview of what GetVantage stands for? What is it that you do? And can you explain the revenue-based financing a little bit for everyone's sake over here?
Sure. So really quickly, what we are trying to do at GetVantage is, well, let me tell you the ethos with which we built this first. The ethos was always to be a founders for founders company, and we don't really do that just for any marketing purpose. That's really the rationale behind every decision we make in the company. Is it founders first or not? If it's not, we don't do it. And the idea stemmed from the fact that in both of our previous lives, effectively, in what we were doing previously, getting access to capital was always very difficult, right? I think we just had the gentleman from Standard Chartered here as well, and I think everyone will agree, especially in the VC world, and it's just a function of how it's matured over a long period of time. A lot of it is based on who you know and who can you get access to, rather than how good your business really is, and are you actually building sustainably, are you profitable or not, how are you scaling. And I think things got lost in all of that, at least in India, and you've seen that as well with the thing, with Shark Tank and whatnot over the last few years. There's always been a fascination around valuation, around how much can I raise, am I successful if I've raised from a venture capitalist, or am I successful if I'm actually profitable? So I think we've lost sight of that a little bit, and that's really why we wanted to come in, because we saw an absolute gap in the market where people do need access to working capital, people need a quick turnaround time, and the terms need to be founder friendly, right? People don't, especially early stage founders or growth stage founders, you do not have to give up equity to spend or invest in growth areas like marketing, product, expansion, etc. Right. There's other ways to get access to that capital.
So just a point over here that, I mean, the pain point of the founders that we also realized as Arthan was that raising funds was actually a function of who you knew back then, right? So the aim that we also started off with was to democratize that and keep it focused on your business, right? Irrespective of whether you know any investor or not, your business metrics, your industry, and your growth should get you to the right investors. Was the genesis of our idea as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we said was we wanted to take a data-driven approach because no one's done that before, and we will only go by data-driven decision making. So what that allows us to do is, and who we are today is, the entire objective was to become a capital gateway. The same way you have payment gateways today and you process all payments through that, our idea is to become a capital gateway for every small business owner, effectively. And what that means is throughout a founder's journey from, well, sort of post-idea stage, but as soon as you start hitting a certain trajectory of revenue, you can come and work with us for all your capital requirements. So while we started off, and I'll get to this in a second, while we started off by doing just revenue-based financing, and we were, I think, the first, if not the first, to pioneer that concept in the market, at least through a tech-first approach. We also do other debt products now. So we also started doing fixed term loans. We also do working capital demand loans, revolving credit facilities, marketing capital, which is, again, specific to use case only for spending on marketing purposes, inventory financing, invoice discounting, etc. as well. So the idea is to essentially be able to have a range of products, again, because it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Every business is different. The stage that a business is in may be different, and the sectors are so different as well, and each of them have very different requirements.
Understood. I mean, that is, I guess, Karun, okay, can you, now, I mean, there are a few who have raised funds, who are in the process of raising funds, and typically, I think, founders being technical people or knowing a lot about their particular business or industry, they are not very aware of what goes around in the funding ecosystem, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about the different types of funding, right? So, what are the pros and cons of equity versus RBF versus, say, the other products that you mentioned?
So I'll try and be very high level about this because otherwise you're getting into a lot of nuances. But I think, see, everyone needs to understand that there's a time for both, right? And funding is always meant debt and equity. It's never just meant equity, which again, people have lost sight of over the last few years. Media has, glorified equity fundraising, VC, even becoming an angel investor. Not a great idea for everyone, by the way. I've learned the hard way.
How much money have you lost?
Not in GetVantage. So GetVantage is going to be my big ticket out of here. So I think people have always for the longest time now, people have misunderstood that it's debt and equity, and they've only focused on equity. And I think what we're starting to do is educate a lot more. And, this only happens through conversations and forums like this, where you're able to help people at least wake up to the fact that, hey, I should also consider this, or I don't know enough about it, so let me go find out more and really do my own research. Like, when is it the right time for me to be raising capital? When is the right time for me to be diluting ownership in my own business and selling that to outside investors, VCs, anybody else? And when is the right time to be able to leverage debt as well, right? Because both are complementary, they're not supplementary to each other at all. And what we're starting to see is, especially in the early stages, you don't need to be giving away ownership or control in your business, because 40 to 50% of every dollar goes straight to digital marketing, which is Google and Facebook. So if you just think about this, the most basic comparison or contextual point I try and give people is, you're giving somebody a percent or whatever. For every dollar in your company you're giving away, you're taking 40% of that and you're giving it straight to Google and Facebook, right? And it's the worst idea. Debt is cheaper than equity in this regard. And so that's really what we try and help founders to understand. Not to disregard debt or say, and we also try and help founders understand that sometimes debt might seem expensive and it may not be the right time. So solutions like revenue-based financing or some of the other products that we now have can seem to be expensive and may only work for you after you've hit a certain MRR or after you're only generating a certain amount of revenue. For pre-product market fit companies, it makes no sense because you're not generating any revenue most of the time. So then obviously, as the lady here said, if you're out there raising or you're raising from friends and family, by all means go do that. There's also crowdfunding now is becoming a big thing as well. So go do that, right? But when you're in the market to actually raise institutional capital, be sure of what you're going to use it for, because equity is risk capital. It's long-term risk capital, right? And if people think they don't need to pay back equity money, you're very wrong. People aren't investing on you to not get paid back. They're investing on you for outsized returns. And often, again, I think people lose sight of that and how expensive it can be.
Definitely, I agree, because I think, everyone can relate to this as well, that with the funding news that is, kind of coming up all the time, right? Everyone is viewing the funding as a success event, right? And they are not starting that this is the start of the journey for their ventures, and they are considering that, okay, I have reached at the peak now that I have raised funds. So I think you might also have seen such a pattern with the founders that you have probably funded as well.
Absolutely, and I think it goes back to just the fact that so my background is in marketing and sort of public policy, and the one thing I told Bhavik, and we debate this every week pretty much, is how much education can I do? Because our work is only built through education, right? There is this fascination, and continues to be, with venture capital, and they've done a great job, because they've spent 15 years, Silicon Valley, to build up this aura around venture capital, equity fundraising, etc., which is now coming into emerging markets like India. So it'll take us some time to, again, help people understand when is the right time to use both. And we see that. Even today, there's companies that we have worked with, very young companies. I'll give you one example, which is Rage Coffee, which is a D2C coffee brand, which has become quite popular now. In fact, they just got Virat Kohli as a brand ambassador, I think, a few months ago. So Bharat, who's the founder, we started working with him about a little bit over 2 years ago, and I think the first round that we gave them was, I think, 5 or 10 lakhs, and the most recent round we've given them was about 5 crores. Right? So we've seen them go through this journey over the last 2 years, where they've come to us, they've raised debt from us, small ticket debt, paid that back, grown substantially, continues to own equity, or continues to retain more equity, and then he's gone out there and been able to raise a Series A, right, at a much higher valuation than he would have been able to previously. And then come back to us for more debt, right, because the working capital requirements for a consumer brand is always going to be there.
Fair enough, fair enough. And have you seen this pattern across multiple founders, that they start off with smaller ticket size and then they grow with you? Or is it that if a founder is at already a good stage, they should approach a company such as yours?
So I would say both. We've been working with lots and lots of founders for 2 years, 18 months, etc., during which we've ended up doing multiple rounds with them. And typically what happens is, I would say every 3rd or 5th round will be substantially more. But it's always a gradual increase, right? So we've seen that many, many times. And again, like I said, many times companies have come, or founders have used us, leveraged the ability to scale by using debt, and then also gone out there and raised equity, which has been quite beneficial for them.
Okay, and I think raising equity funds is a very time-consuming process, probably requires a couple of months at least, right? So what is it, what is the timeline that a founder can expect with you guys?
Great question, Malar. And I would say even more than a couple of months, right? Sometimes it takes months and months. You might just spend a couple of months going back and forth on on agreements. So I think that's the biggest difference with us. What we say, and this again, a little bit of marketing speak, but we say you can apply within about 20 minutes. You can get a bespoke offer within 48 hours. So that's the turnaround time we have in when we'll give you an offer is 48 hours. And you can get funded in as fast as 5 days. So we've done deals where disbursals have happened within 4 days, 5 days. Average tends to be 7 to 10 days, but more so not because of us and our processes. It's just because there is always back and forth on terms, on agreements, on collections of documents, KYC, etc. So that process ends up being 2 to 3 weeks, but that's still, a tenth of the time that you might spend.
Much faster, definitely. So the founders over here would obviously have a question that how are you evaluating startups, right? What is the basis of which you are providing funding in any form, basically? Can you explain that so that the founders in the audience can evaluate if their business is suitable for exploring such options, because this is much faster, definitely.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, very simple. Again, very high level criteria is if you're a revenue generating business, if you have at least 6 to 12 months of vintage, we want to hear from you, right? So that's the very minimal criteria. And as long as you're doing probably upwards of about 5 to 7 lakhs a month in revenue, then you come into a relatively decent sweet spot where the debt that you might be able to get from us is not going to be outsized in terms of how expensive it is for you or for your business. But again, going back to one of the things you said at the beginning, which is we're able to work with businesses across sectors, right? So we're completely sector agnostic and size agnostic in that sense, where we work with pre-seed companies, bootstrap founders. We work with much larger VC-funded businesses that are in Series D, Series E stage as well. So another good example to give you is BlueSmart, which is a big ride-hailing company, in the spotlight these days. So we've done 2 or 3 big rounds with them in the multiple crore range, yeah, we're completely agnostic in that sense.
Okay, and now a question slightly closer to home, right? Now you yourself are a startup which has raised, say, around $40 million, right? Tell us about your journey from 2020 to 2023. Any takeaways from that journey as well, because you have grown clearly. So as the Chief Growth Officer, what is it that you have done right?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I would say, I think what we've, again, from the very beginning, we've been focused on building sustainably, right? Because we always knew if we were to be a founders for founders company and really live that ethos every day, we have to put founders first, and that doesn't mean trying to go out there and win as much new business as you can, and then not being able to offer the highest level of service or make sure that the turnaround time, as an example, is really short. We need to have our processes in place. So we spent, we started early 2020. We spent the first 6 to 9 months not out there trying to win new business. Business was coming our way, trickling in through COVID, but just building our tech, right? We focused on building a really robust tech platform so that it could scale, and when the floodgates opened, so to speak, we could handle it. And we always knew we wanted to be tech first in decision making, right? That we wanted to eradicate, again, going back to equity funding and the venture capital ecosystem, there's a lot of bias, right? Even for, and our friend from Standard Chartered was just saying this, they're doing something for women founders now, right? Women founders globally are underserved and underfunded hugely. Right. And we knew, and that's why is that? Again, it's because of bias. There's, unconscious gender bias in a lot of these decision making or in boardrooms. So we wanted to make sure that we eradicate that completely, not
to a data-driven approach, right?
To data-driven, right? So if your business, if your financial statements, if your revenue generating ability says or sends a particular signal to us, that's what we're going to base our decision on, not on whether we like the way you look or the color of your skin, or if you're in a sari or where you're wearing pant and shirt. It doesn't matter. Or where you're from, right? And I think, so one was making sure we spent and we focused on that, and we were always, again, with a longer lens, focused on our long-term mission. And 2, I think what's gotten us really well through this time period has also been the team, right? A lot of businesses, again, I hate to sort of throw venture capital on the bus a little bit, but because of all of the VC money that's flooded into the market over the last 5-7 years, and you're seeing this now, a lot of tech companies, a lot of startups overhired, right? They have very large populations in terms of workforce, which is why you're seeing the number of layoffs that you are last year and this year. And that's crazy to think about the number of now unemployed people that are there in the market, or the kind of salary expectations a lot of these people have because they've been overpaid for so long. So we've been very mindful of, again, sustainable growth where we've had a small team, kept it lean, and tried to make sure that we can grow at our pace, not being pressured to grow at the pace that anybody thinks we should be growing at, right? So while the competitive landscape has gotten more busy, even in our space, with a few other competitors in Bangalore, etc., we know what their sizes are, and we know what our sizes are, and we know where we stand in the market and where they do. And we're very happy with where we are. So I think there's a lot more ability you can do with a small, highly capable team instead of just going out there and trying to hire people for the sake of it or thinking you need a bigger sales team than you do.
Okay. So I mean, again, the team is at the crux of it all. And what are are there any takeaways from a marketing standpoint that you'd want to share with founders, right? Because majority of the times when we are looking for raising funds, a huge portion is going to be used for marketing, right? Or even prior to raising funds. And the question that I have been asked so many times is that I don't have enough budgets to spend on, say, ads, or I don't have enough marketing budgets overall, but I do want to see customer growth. What should I do?
A really interesting question, and I have a very different take from most people on this because it's also the way we've gone about doing marketing for GetVantage. And this actually, my inspiration for this was something, I'm a big petrol head, if people in the room don't know, people who love the automotive space, cars, etc. And way back in, I think it was 2002, 2003, BMW at the time had done the first bit of true global content marketing, and not many people know this, but they had come up with a series of 6 short films, about 2 to 5 minutes long each, but directed by world-famous directors, John Woo, like high-level directors, had a A-list Hollywood actor as the face of this short film, and then had a lot of cameos from other really, A-list celebrities and whatnot. But what they were trying to do was essentially make it viral. First bit of viral content marketing. Anybody could access it. If you were a fan of the brand, if you're a fan of the automotive space, you would somehow come across these films, and you could order your own DVD. There were DVDs and VCDs at the time, right? So you could order your own DVD and they'd send it to you free. Now what that inspired me to do was everybody else in terms of even automotive marketing was all the same. Coke sells you their products the same way, Nike, Adidas, whatever, they sell you their products more or less the same way, of course. But they were the ones to do it differently, where you're not selling a car. You're selling a film. You're selling an experience about how that car's been embedded into the journey that you're being taken through on film, right? Yeah. And that's an experience. It's something that stays with you. So everything that we started to do was, even at GetVantage, I have a couple of colleagues in the back. You should look at their T-shirts. But it's very bold, and it's in your face, right? And it's purely designed to just cut through the clutter.
Get funded.
Yeah, well, I don't say the first word because there are 2 asterisks there, but exactly.
Yeah, nobody could have guessed. Nobody could have guessed those 2 asterisks.
But exactly, right? And it's just bold. And everyone, we started using this, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. And we use it in events and things like that. And everyone comes and just compliments us. And the idea was not to sell the business, although that's what we're doing with the funded aspect of it, but also just doing it in a fun way, where you're poking fun at everything that's been going on. And hey, it's a subtle way of saying retain ownership, right? You don't have to give away part of your company.
Also, but okay, so you're saying that there are ways in which low-cost communications can be built, right? But with your portfolio, right? Have you seen any interesting stories of founders actually scaling up a lot? What tricks have they used? Any message for the audience over here?
Yeah, so I would say just 2 or 3 really simple things. I think, again, people have misunderstood or think that I have to go to an ad agency or I have to go for external support to do some amazing marketing. There's some brilliant marketing talent that's out there. You can work with freelancers, and now with everything that's happening in AI, you can do so much yourself. Like, I'm using some tool of AI every day just to get familiar with what is out there, what are the capabilities we can bring in-house, and what can we actually do without needing outside support, right? And I think AI is going to change the game completely. There's amazing tools out there, so I really encourage everyone to just be out there researching yourself and actually using it, right? You can't, actually get better at something if you don't use it every day. So definitely do that. Two is, I think, again, be creative. There's a lot of, if you crowdsource ideas, sometimes you can really uncover something pretty game-changing. And we've done that a lot internally. Of course, sometimes you may want to spend some money, but there's a lot that you can do internally just through crowdsourcing. Some of the ideas we've done with brands as well is we've encouraged them to crowdsource ideas from their audience, their customer base, right? Typically, especially if you're a consumer brand, you will have people who, again, you can rank them by sort of category, but you have people who are users, advocates, ambassadors, and really proud to be a user of a particular brand or service or product. And why not bring them into the fold? Because everyone has great ideas, and we've done that previously as well. Like, how do you get good ideas is through feedback, right? You want to improve your product or service, and the only way to do that is by speaking to your customers on a regular basis. So, encourage you to tap into this huge brain power base that you might have through customers as well. And I would say the last thing is be bold. Okay, I think for too long, at least in India, people have been very subtle when it comes to advertising and marketing. But clearly, I mean, ours is a great example of this. I was very firm that we were going to be bold. I don't, like, our competitors, other people can do what they want, but the only way you're going to cut through the clutter in India, or not necessarily even India, but just through the amount of advertising and marketing that you will see as a single consumer every day, is by being bold. Otherwise, you will never have, it'll never be recollected by most people.
Thanks a lot for doing this. A big round of applause for Karun.